Jane's.
Do you want me to stay in?
Sorry.
Do you want me to do the next chapter?
If you want, then I'll do the final one. Okay, thanks.
No.
No, that's okay. It's very short. We're just handing you over to one of the crew. It's chapter 60, I believe, and it's the penultimate chapter, and then I'll be back to finish the full one.
Elizabeth's spirits soon rising to playfulness again, she wanted Mr. Darcy to account for his ever having fallen in love with her. How could you begin, she said. I can't comprehend your going charmingly when you had once made a beginning. But what could set you off in the first place? I cannot fix on the hour, or the spot, or the look, or the words which laid the foundation. It was too long ago. I was in the middle before I knew it had begun. My beauty you had early withstood. As for my manners, my behaviour to you was at least always bordering on uncivil, and I never spoke to you without rather wishing to give you pain than not. Now be sincere. Did you admire me for my impertinence, or for the liveliness of your mind? I did. You may as well call it impertinence at once. It was very little less. The fact is that you were sick of civility or deference or vivacious attention. You were disgusted with the woman who was always speaking and looking and thinking. Your apparition alone. I rose and interested you because I was so unlike them. Had you not been really amiable, you would have hated me for it, but in spite of the pains you took to disguise yourself, your feelings were always noble and just, and in your heart you thoroughly despised the persons who assiduously courted you. There I have saved you the trouble of accounting for it, and really, all things considered, I begin to think it perfectly reasonable to be sure you knew no actual good of me. But nobody thinks that when they fall in love. This was no good in your affectionate behaviour to Jane while she was ill in Netherfield. Dearest Jane, you could have done less for her, but make a virtue of it by means. My good qualities under your protection, and you are to exaggerate them as much as possible, and in return it belongs to me to find occasions for teasing and quarrelling with you as often as may be. I shall begin directly by asking you what made you so unwilling to come to the point at last. What made you so shy of me when you first called and afterwards dined here? Why, especially when you called, did you look as if you did not care about me? Because you were grave and silent and gave me no encouragement, but I was embarrassed, and so was I. You might have talked to me more when you came to dinner. A man who felt less might. How unlucky you should have a reasonable answer to give, and that I should be so reasonable as to omit it. But I wonder how long you would have gone on if you had not left yourself, and if you had not been left to yourself. I wonder when you would have spoken, as if I had not asked you. My resolution to thanking you for your kindness to Linda was certainly great effect. Too much, I'm afraid, for what becomes of moral if our comfort springs from a breach of promise, for I ought not have mentioned the subject. This will never do. You need more distress yourself. The moral will be perfectly fair. Lady Catherine's unjustifiable endeavours to separate us were the means of removing all of my doubts. I am not indebted for my present happiness to your eager desire to express your gratitude. I was not in a humour to wait for an opening of yours. My auntie's intelligence had given me hope, and I was determined at once to know everything. Lady Catherine has been of infinite use, which ought to make her happy, for she loves to be of use. But tell me, what did you come down to Netherfield for? Was it merely to ride to Longbourn and be embarrassed? or had you intended a more serious consequence? My real purpose was to see you, and to judge, if I could, whether I might ever hope to make you love me. My avowed one, or what I vowed to myself, was to see whether your sister was still partial to Bingley, and if she were, to make the confession to him which I have since made. Shall you ever have courage to announce Lady Catherine what is to befall her? I am more likely to want time to encourage Elizabeth, but it ought to be done, and if you will give me a sheet of paper, it shall be done directly. And if I had not a letter to write myself, I might sit by you and admire the evenness of your writing, and as another young lady once did. But I have an aunt too, who must no longer be neglected. For an unwillingness to confess how much her intimacy, Mr. Darcy, has been overrated, Elizabeth has never yet answered Mr. Gardiner's long letter, but now, having that to communicate which she knew would be most welcome, she was almost ashamed to find that her uncle and her aunt had already lost 3 days of happiness, and immediately wrote as follows. I would have thanked you before, my dear aunt, as I ought to have done, for your long, kind, satisfactory detail of particulars, but to say the truth, I was too cross to write. You're supposed more than really existed. But now, suppose as much as you choose, give a loose of your fancy, indulge in your imagination in every possible flight which the subject will afford, and unless you believe me actually married, you cannot greatly err. You must write again very soon, and praise him a great deal more than you did in your last. I thank you, and again, for not going to the lakes. How could I be so silly as to wish it? Your idea of the ponies is delightful. We will go round the park every day, as I am the happiest creature in the world. Perhaps other people have said so before, but no one with such justice. I am happier even than Jane. She only smiles. I laugh. Mr. Darcy sends you all the love in the world that he can spare from me. You are to come to Pemberley at Christmas. Yours, a fancy. Mr. Darcy's letter to Catherine was in a different style, and still different from either was that Mr. Bennet sent to Mr. Collins in reply to his last. Dear Sir, I must trouble you once more for congratulations. Elizabeth will soon be the wife of Mr. Darcy. Console Lady Catherine as you can, but if I were you, I would stand by your nephew, as he has more to give. Yours sincerely, and C. Mrs. Bingley's congratulations to her brother on this approaching marriage were all that was affectionate and insincere. She wrote even to Jane on the occasion to express her delight and repeat all her former professions of regard. Jane was not deceived, but she was affected, and though feeling no reliance on her, could not help writing her a much kinder answer than she knew she was deserved. The joy which Mr. Darcy expressed on receiving similar information was as sincere as the brothers in sending it. 4 sides the paper were insufficient to contain all her delight, and all her earnest of being loved by her sister. Before any answer could arrive from Mr. Collins, or congratulations to Elizabeth from his wife, the Longbourn family heard that the Collinses were to come themselves to Lucas Lodge. The reason of this sudden removal was so soon evident. Lady Catherine had been rendered so exceedingly angry by the contents of her nephew's letter that Charlotte, really rejoicing in the match, was anxious to get away till the storm was blown over. At such a moment the arrival of her friend was a sincere pleasure to Elizabeth, though in course of their meetings she must sometimes think the pleasure dearly bought. When she saw Mr. Darcy exposed to all the parading and strenuous civilities of her husband, he bore it, however, with admirable calmness. He could even listen to Sir William Lucas when he complimented him on carrying away the brightest jewels of the country, and expressed his hopes of all their meetings frequently at St. James's, with very decent composure. If he did shrug his shoulders, it was not till Sir William was out of sight. Miss Phillips's vulgarity was another and perhaps a greater tax on his forbearance, and though Miss Phillips, as well as his sisters, stood in too much awe of him to speak with formality which Mr. Bingley's good humour encouraged, yet whenever she did speak, she must be vulgar. Nor was her respect for him, though it made her more quiet, at all likely to make her more elegant. Elizabeth did all she could to shield him from the frequent notice of either, and was ever anxious to keep him to herself, and to those of her family with whom he might converse without mortification, and though uncomfortable feelings arising from all this took from the seasons of courtship much of its pleasure, it added to the hope of the future, and she looked forward with delight to the time when they should be removed from society so little pleasing to either, to all the comfort and elegance of the family party at Pemberley.
Brilliant, thanks Toby. Thank you Toby, right, that was the penultimate chapter of the set. Just before I read the last one, I don't know if the crew want to just come in and just give a wave. You've been stars today. It's 3 o'clock in the morning here in Bath in England. We've been at it since 11 o'clock, obviously, as you know. I know you're with us as well, so it's great. But this is the crew. Some of the guys, their colleagues have come in today. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Good job.
Thanks very much. So,
as you can see, we're all very, very tired.
Yeah. So right, we're just going to do the last chapter now.
Woo, power through.
And as I said, thank you for joining us today on this fantastic occasion. And the fact, I am just going to read the last chapter, the fact that we have done it, we've read the entire book through the days. So, right, without further ado, let's start then. Chapter 61. Happy for all her maternal feelings was the day on which Mrs. Bennet got rid of her two most deserving daughters. With what delighted pride she afterwards visited Mr. Bingley and talked of Mr. Darcy may be guessed. I wish I could say, for the sake of her family, that the accomplishment of her earnest desire in the establishment of so many of her children produced so happy an effect as to make her a sensible, amiable, well-informed woman for the rest of her life. Though perhaps it was lucky for her husband, who might not have relished domestic felicity in such unusual form, that she still was occasionally nervous and invariably silly. Mr. Bennet missed his second daughter exceedingly. His affection for her drew him oftener from home than anything else could do. He delighted in going to Pemberley, especially when he was least expected. Mr. Bingley and Jane remained at Netherfield only a 12-month. So near vicinity to her mother, and merits and relations were not desirable even to his easy temper, or her affectionate heart. The darling wish of his sisters was then gratified. He bought an estate in a neighbouring county of Derbyshire, and Jane and Elizabeth, in addition to every other source of happiness, were within 30 miles of each other. Kitty, to a very material advantage, spent the chief of her time with her two elder sisters. In society so superior to what she had generally known, her improvement was great. She was not of so ungovernable a temper as Lydia, and, removed from the influence of Lydia's example, she became, by proper attention and management, less irritable, less ignorant, and less insipid. From the farther disadvantage of Lydia's society, she was of course carefully kept, and though Mrs. Wickham frequently invited her to come and stay with her, with the promise of balls and young men, her father would never consent to her going. Mary was the only daughter who remained at home, and she was necessarily drawn from the pursuit of accomplishments by Mrs. Bennet's being quite unable to sit alone. Mary was obliged to mix more with the world, but she could still moralise over every morning visit, and as she was no longer mortified by comparisons between her sister's beauty and her own, it was suspected by her father that she submitted to the change without much reluctance. As for Wickham and Lydia, their characters suffered no revolution from the marriage of her sisters. He bore with philosophy the conviction that Elizabeth must now become acquainted with whatever of his ingratitude and falsehood had before been unknown to her, and in spite of everything was not wholly without hope that Darcy might yet be prevailed on to make his fortune. The congratulatory letter which Elizabeth received from Lydia on her marriage explained to her that, by his wife at least, if not by himself, such a hope was cherished. The letter was to this effect: "My dear Lizzie, I wish you joy. If you love Mr. Darcy half as well as I do my dear Wickham, you must be very happy. It is a great comfort to have you so rich, and when you have nothing else to do, I hope you will think of us. I am sure Wickham would like a place at court very much, and I do not think we shall have quite money enough to live upon without some help. Any place would do, or about 300 or 400 a year, but, however, do not speak to Mr. Darcy about it, if you had rather not. Yours, etc." As it happened that Elizabeth had much rather not, she endeavoured in her answer to put an end to every entreaty and expectation of the kind. Such relief, however, as it was in her power to afford by the practice of what might be called economy in her own private expenses, she frequently sent them. It had always been evident to her that such an income as theirs, under the direction of two persons so extravagant in their wants and heedless of the future, must be very insufficient to their support. And whenever they changed their quarters, either Jane or herself was sure of being applied to for some little assistance towards discharging